For this video, I'm going to do something a little different and do a longer form piece diving into a very fixated on talking point. I hope you find it informative and useful, and if it's well received, then I'll do more videos like this in the future. And today I want to talk about settler colonialism, specifically analyzing Israel as a settler colonial state. Contemporary thought on the left is that Israel is a settler colonial state, while basically the entire right and even some centrist and liberal voices push back against this. I'm here to argue not that Israel lines up with every single definition of settler colonialism, but that the label of settler colonialism is overall a useful analysis through which to dissect Israel's violence against Palestinians. So first, to define settler colonialism. Settler colonialism is when a colonizing body brings a massive group of people into a new region to settle the area and disenfranchise the native or indigenous people. By this admittedly short definition, Israel hits the nail right on the head. The Zionist project was spearheaded by European Jews who immigrated to Palestine and eventually, through a variety of means, forced the Palestinian indigenous community out of their homes and off of their land. There are many on the right who will argue that because Jews have an historical connection to the land of Israel or historical Palestine, they can't carry out settler colonialism in the lands that they are from or indigenous to. The historic presence of Jews in the land does not change the fact that the original Zionists were coming from Europe to carry out their state project. A state project which did not represent Palestinian Arabs and very much was premised on displacing or disenfranchising them. It's also worth noting that a sort of reclaiming of indigenous identity has occurred throughout multiple settler colonial projects. Most notably, this happened in the US and South Africa, where both of the colonizing bodies began to claim that the land was actually promised to them or originally theirs in the first place. Even if in the specific case of Israel, the kernel of truth seems a little larger, the historical track record shows that we should be incredibly skeptical of this line of thinking. Another common argument for why Israel can't be a settler colonial state is that there's no metropole. This argument is probably of better faith in its origin, but definitely also has shortcomings. A metropole is the larger state that the settler population has citizenship to or allegiance towards. For example, the French settlers of Algeria held French citizenship, and before the US separated from Britain, the American colonizers had British citizenship and paid taxes to the British Kingdom. Of course, when the US gained independence, it did not stop being a settler colonial entity and indeed carried out most of its settler colonialism, ethnic cleansing, and genocide of the indigenous people of Turtle Island after separating from Britain. As a side note, this lack of a metropole is why I think Israel is much more comparable to the US in its mechanisms of settler colonialism than French Algeria, which is a much more common and prevalent comparison that is made. The last common argument I want to refute, though it's the one that's made in poorest taste, is that because Ashkenazi Jews were oppressed in Europe, they can't be carrying out settler colonialism in Palestine. This obviously doesn't actually make sense, as it's very clear that people who were oppressed can also go on to oppress other people, but I want to point out that this actually indeed is very common. Columbus was a social outcast, and the original pilgrims who colonized Turtle Island were viewed as religious radicals. The British used Australia as a prison island, and the original Dutch colonizers of South Africa were also social outcasts. It's very common for settler colonialism to use the dregs of society to sort of carry out the dirty work. We see this in Israel with the Balfour Declaration, where the British effectively admitted that it was advantageous to them to get rid of their Jewish population that they despised by getting them to colonize Palestine, which would also benefit the British who wanted a foothold in the Middle East. We see this internally in Israel to this day. The West Bank settlers are extremists who do not enjoy any social status within Israel. When it comes to global politics, almost nothing perfectly fits a definition in one square peg. But especially when settler expansion in the West Bank is constantly escalating, and when Bibi is talking about reoccupying Gaza, settler colonialism is absolutely a valuable lens through which to understand Israel.